They don't ignore you because you're weak. They ignore you because you've taught them there is no price for taking from you. Every favor, every sacrifice, every time you stayed silent when someone crossed the line, you were writing a contract that told the world you can take more. The frightening part. Most people believe kindness creates respect. It doesn't. Without boundaries, kindness becomes permission, and permission becomes exploitation. Today, you'll discover the psychological mistake that quietly destroys self-respect, why manipulators seem to find the same type of people, and the one shift that instantly changes how people see you. But be careful. Once you understand this, you will never be able to live the same way again. Almost everyone grows up believing that being helpful is the safest way to earn love. Be generous, be patient, avoid conflict, always understand other people. At first, it sounds noble, but something strange begins happening. The more available you become, the less valuable you appear, the more you forgive, the more disrespect you tolerate, the more you sacrifice, the more people expect. Eventually, you realize something painful. You aren't appreciated, you're expected. That isn't kindness, that's conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you stopped teaching people how to treat you and started teaching them how much you would tolerate. That is exactly what we'll dismantle today. Because the world doesn't simply react to your words, it reacts to the standards you consistently enforce. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel. Every week we break down psychology, Machiavellian strategy, human behavior, and mental discipline to help you become impossible to manipulate. Now, let's begin with the first lesson. There is a silent moment that changes the direction of almost every person's life. Most never notice it. It isn't graduation. It isn't getting married. It isn't landing your first job. It happens much earlier. It happens the first time you betray yourself to make someone else comfortable. Maybe you were a child. Someone interrupted you while you were speaking. You stayed quiet. Someone laughed at your opinion. You smiled even though it hurt. Someone crossed a boundary. Instead of defending yourself, you convinced yourself it wasn't worth the conflict. That moment seems insignificant. But your subconscious remembers it, because every time you silence your own instincts, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. My comfort matters less than theirs. At first, it feels like maturity. Then it becomes habit. Eventually, it becomes your identity. You become the person who is always available, always understanding, always forgiving, always sacrificing. People call you kind, but kindness isn't what they're rewarding. They're rewarding your predictability. They know exactly what you'll do. You'll say yes. You'll apologize first. You'll give another chance. You'll explain their bad behavior instead of questioning it. You become emotionally safe, not because you're respected, but because you're unlikely to resist. This is one of the oldest principles in human behavior. People constantly calculate risk, not consciously, instinctively. Every interaction answers one invisible question. If I pushed this person, what happens? If the answer is nothing, the pushing continues. It starts with tiny things. Someone interrupts you during conversations. You laugh it off. Someone constantly arrives late. You excuse it. Someone borrows your time without asking. You allow it. Someone speaks to you with subtle disrespect. You remain silent. None of these moments seem important, but together they create a psychological profile. A profile that silently tells the world, there are no consequences here. Human beings adapt astonishingly fast, not only to rewards, but to the absence of resistance. Imagine touching a hot stove. You never do it again. Now imagine touching another stove, and nothing happens. Soon, you stop being careful. People behave exactly the same way. Where there are consequences, there is caution. Where there are none, there is entitlement. This is why respect rarely disappears overnight. It erodes, one tolerated violation at a time. Machiavelli understood something about power that most people never realize. Power is rarely taken in one dramatic moment. It is surrendered through small compromises. Every unnecessary apology, every uncomfortable silence, every boundary abandoned for temporary peace. Each one is a brick removed from the wall protecting your self-respect. Eventually, the wall no longer exists, and people don't even realize they're walking through it. They simply see an open door. You might think this sounds cynical. It isn't. It's observable. Watch any workplace. The employee who never says no eventually receives the largest workload, not because they're the most capable, because they're the least likely to refuse. Watch families. One sibling becomes the emotional caretaker. Everyone unloads their problems onto them. Nobody asks whether they're exhausted. Why? Because they've unknowingly accepted the role. Watch friendships. There is always one person organizing everything, checking on everyone, giving more than they receive. When they finally stop, everyone accuses them of changing, but nothing changed, only access changed. And people confuse losing access with losing love. That confusion traps millions because they begin believing that being needed means being valued. Those are completely different things. A phone charger is needed. No one respects it. A tool is useful. No one asks how it feels. If your entire identity becomes usefulness, you slowly stop feeling human. You become a function, a resource, a convenience. The tragedy is that many people mistake exhaustion for purpose. They think, I'm tired because I'm important. No, sometimes you're tired because everyone has learned they can take from you without permission. Carl Jung warned that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge eventually control us. One of those forgotten parts is healthy aggression, not violence, not cruelty. Aggression in its healthiest form simply says, this far, no further. Children understand this naturally. Watch two children playing. One grabs the other's toy. The second child immediately resists. There is no guilt, no long explanation, just a clear signal. No, adults lose this. Not because they mature, because they become afraid of rejection, afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing people. So instead of protecting their boundaries, they negotiate against themselves, little by little, until one day they wake up wondering why nobody respects them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People cannot respect boundaries they have never seen. If you've spent years teaching everyone that you'll tolerate everything, they won't magically change. Because from their perspective, nothing is wrong. They're simply following the rules you've demonstrated. That realization can be painful, but it's also liberating. Because if your behavior taught people how to treat you, your behavior can teach them something new. Not through speeches, not through arguments, through consistency. Because every relationship, whether romantic, professional, or social, operates according to invisible expectations. Change the expectations, and eventually, you change the relationship. But before that transformation can happen, you must understand the hidden addiction that keeps people trapped in the role of being endlessly available. And that addiction is far more dangerous than most realize. There is a prison, that has no walls, no guards, no chains. From the outside, your life looks completely normal. You go to work, you answer messages, you help your friends, you smile, you laugh. But inside, almost every decision you make is controlled by one invisible question. Will they still like me if I do this? That question has more power over your life than you realize. It decides what you say, what you hide, what you tolerate, even who you become. The greatest manipulators understand this instinct better than the people they manipulate, because they know something about human psychology. Most people are not controlled by fear, they are controlled by the fear of rejection. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to something you didn't want simply because saying no felt uncomfortable? How many times have you laughed at a joke you didn't find funny? How many times have you apologized, not because you were wrong, but because you wanted the tension to disappear? Every one of those moments reinforces the same pattern. My peace depends on their approval. Once your brain accepts that belief, you become programmable. Not by technology, by people. Because anyone capable of controlling your emotions eventually controls your behavior. This is why emotionally manipulative people rarely begin with obvious abuse. They begin with rewards, attention, compliments, validation, affection. Your brain quickly connects one idea. When they're happy with me, I feel safe. Soon, keeping them happy becomes your emotional job. Without realizing it, you've outsourced your peace of mind. Now, imagine someone withdraws their affection. They become distant, cold, silent. Your nervous system immediately panics. What did I do wrong? Notice something. They haven't accused you of anything, yet you're already searching for your own mistake. This is psychological conditioning. You've learned to blame yourself before questioning the other person's behavior. That is exactly where exploitation begins. Machiavelli observed that dependence creates obedience. Most people assume dependence only means money. It doesn't. You can become emotionally dependent, socially dependent, psychologically dependent. When another person's opinion determines your emotional stability, you have surrendered power. The irony is painful. You spend years trying to become more likable, only to become less respected, because people instinctively trust those who trust themselves, not those constantly asking for permission to exist. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg for attention. Real confidence communicates something much quieter. I'll be okay, even if you disagree with me. That sentence terrifies manipulators, because they cannot negotiate with someone who isn't desperate for acceptance. Think about the strongest people you've ever met. Were they trying to convince everyone to like them? Probably not. Some people admired them, others didn't, and they remained exactly the same. Their identity wasn't rented from public opinion. It belonged to them. Now compare that with someone addicted to approval. They become different versions of themselves depending on who's watching. One personality at work, another with friends, another with family, another online. They're exhausted. Not because life is difficult, but because maintaining multiple masks requires constant effort. Carl Jung believed that the more masks a person wears, the further they drift from themselves. Eventually, they no longer know which personality is real. The tragedy isn't pretending. The tragedy is forgetting who you were before the pretending started. Many people think they're being kind. They're actually performing. They're acting out a role they hope will earn love. The reliable one, the funny one, the peacemaker, the rescuer, the therapist, the perfect employee, the selfless partner. The problem is that roles become cages. The moment you try to step outside them, people become uncomfortable. Not because you've become worse, because you've become unpredictable. And predictability is exactly what allowed them to benefit from you. Watch what happens the first time you refuse an unreasonable request. The reaction often has nothing to do with the request itself. It's about the disruption. People rarely resist your boundary. They resist losing the version of you that had none. This is why change feels lonely. Not everyone celebrates your growth. Some people only liked the version of you they could control. The moment you become emotionally independent, those relationships begin to crack. At first, this feels like loss, but it isn't. It's revelation. You're finally discovering who was connected to you and who was connected to your usefulness. Those are not the same thing. Psychologists often describe this as breaking a reinforcement loop. Every time you abandon your needs to make someone comfortable, your brain receives short-term relief. Conflict disappears. The other person smiles. Everything feels calm again. That relief becomes addictive. Soon, avoiding discomfort becomes more important than protecting yourself. But short-term comfort creates long-term resentment. You begin carrying invisible anger, not toward others, toward yourself, because somewhere deep inside, you know you've abandoned your own truth. Self-respect cannot survive repeated self-betrayal. Every unnecessary yes quietly becomes another no directed at yourself. Eventually, your subconscious starts believing something dangerous. If even I won't protect myself, why should anyone else? People unconsciously mirror the standards you demonstrate. If you constantly sacrifice your own value, don't be surprised when others assign you the same price. The solution isn't becoming cold. It isn't becoming selfish. It isn't pushing everyone away. It's something much more difficult, learning to disappoint people without disappointing yourself. That is emotional freedom. The day you stop managing everyone else's emotions, you finally begin managing your own life. But making that shift requires confronting one fear almost everyone avoids, the fear of becoming the villain in someone else's story. And that fear is exactly what we'll face next. There is a sentence that terrifies almost everyone, not because it's cruel, but because it demands something most people have never practiced. No. One word, 2 letters. Yet for many people, saying it feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Why? Because somewhere in your mind, you've confused rejection with danger. Thousands of years ago, being rejected by the tribe could mean death. Isolation meant fewer resources, less protection, a lower chance of survival. Your nervous system still carries that ancient programming, so every time someone looks disappointed with you, your brain reacts as if your life is under threat. Your heart races, your stomach tightens. You begin searching for ways to fix the situation, not because you've done something wrong, but because your biology mistakes disapproval for disaster. Manipulative people don't create this fear, they simply recognize it. And once they discover that your greatest weakness is disappointing others, they never stop pulling that string. Some will use guilt. I thought you cared about me. Others will use shame. You've changed. Others will play the victim. I guess I just can't count on you anymore. Different words. Same objective. To make your boundaries feel immoral. The remarkable thing is that none of these tactics actually force you to say yes. They simply make saying no feel emotionally expensive. And because you've spent years avoiding emotional discomfort, you surrender again. But every surrender carries a hidden cost. Every time you betray your own values to protect someone else's feelings, your self-respect weakens. Confidence doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks away, one unnecessary apology at a time, one broken boundary at a time, one silent compromise after another. Eventually, you look in the mirror and wonder why you no longer recognize yourself. The answer is simple. You've spent so much time becoming who everyone else wanted that you've forgotten who you wanted to be. Carl Jung believed that becoming psychologically whole requires embracing the parts of yourself you've spent years hiding. One of those forgotten parts is your ability to confront, not attack, not dominate, simply confront. Healthy confrontation isn't aggression, it's honesty with consequences. Imagine someone repeatedly interrupts you. The old version of you laughs nervously, waits politely, speaks softer. The new version doesn't raise their voice. They simply say, "I'd like to finish my point." Then they continue speaking. No apology, no anger, no explanation, just certainty. That moment may last only a few seconds, but psychologically, everything changes. Because people don't merely listen to your words, they measure your willingness to defend them. If you won't defend your own voice, why should anyone else value it? This is why calm people often appear more powerful than loud people. Loudness seeks control. Calmness demonstrates it. Watch someone with genuine authority. They rarely rush, rarely over-explain, rarely chase agreement. They don't argue with every criticism. They simply know who they are. That certainty creates gravity. People naturally adjust around it. The opposite is equally true. Someone constantly explaining themselves appears uncertain. Every explanation quietly says, "Please understand me." But people rarely respect desperation. They respect conviction. One of Machiavelli's most misunderstood ideas is that reputation matters more than intention. You may intend to be kind, but if your behavior consistently communicates weakness, people respond to the behavior, not the intention. Human beings judge patterns, not promises. This is why changing your life requires changing repeated behavior, not making emotional speeches. Suppose a friend repeatedly asks for favors that consume your time. For years, you've agreed. Then one day you calmly say, "I can't do that." Watch carefully. Their first reaction isn't about the favor, it's about the interruption of expectation. They'll often negotiate, question you, pressure you, maybe even criticize you. Don't panic. This doesn't necessarily mean they're toxic. It means the relationship is recalibrating. You're changing the rules. People naturally resist change, especially when they benefited from the previous arrangement. Here's where most people fail. They mistake discomfort for failure. The conversation feels awkward, so they retreat. "Never mind, I'll do it." And just like that, the old pattern survives. Real boundaries require consistency, not intensity. You don't need dramatic speeches, you need repetition. The first no surprises people, the second earns attention, the third creates a new expectation. Eventually, your boundary becomes your identity. Not because you demanded respect, because you demonstrated standards. There is another fear hidden beneath all this, the fear of being misunderstood. You want everyone to know your heart, your intentions, your reasons. But life doesn't work that way. Some people will misunderstand you, no matter how clearly you explain yourself. Others will deliberately misunderstand you because the truth doesn't benefit them. Accepting this changes everything. Freedom begins the moment you stop trying to manage everyone's opinion of you, because that's a battle no one has ever won. The strongest people in history were criticized. The wisest were mocked. The kindest were misunderstood. Trying to avoid criticism is like trying to stop the rain. Impossible. Instead, learn to become comfortable standing in it. There is a quiet confidence that develops when you no longer fear being someone's disappointment. It doesn't make you colder, it makes you clearer. You stop chasing approval. You stop negotiating your values. You stop explaining every decision. You begin living according to an internal compass instead of external applause. Ironically, this is the exact moment people begin respecting you more, not because you've become intimidating, because you've become stable, predictable in the right way. People know your principles aren't for sale. And when people realize they cannot manipulate your standards, they stop trying. But becoming this person requires one final transformation, because boundaries alone aren't enough. You must build a life so meaningful that your identity no longer depends on who stays or who walks away. And that is where true freedom begins. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize something uncomfortable. The people who seem impossible to manipulate are rarely the strongest. They're simply the least dependent. Dependence is the invisible leash. The more your happiness relies on one person, one job, one opportunity, one source of validation, the easier it becomes for someone to control you. This is why freedom isn't first a financial condition. It's a psychological one. A person with little money but absolute self-respect can sometimes be freer than someone with millions who cannot tolerate being disliked. Control always follows dependency. Ask yourself one question. Who has the power to ruin your entire week? A boss? A partner? A parent? A stranger on social media? If someone's opinion can completely destabilize your emotional state, they possess more influence over your life than they should. The goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to stop depending. There is a massive difference. Machiavelli understood something timeless. The ruler who depends entirely on others is never truly powerful. The same applies to individuals. If your identity depends on applause, you'll perform forever. If your peace depends on agreement, you'll compromise forever. If your confidence depends on success, failure will destroy you. Real power begins when your foundation moves inside. Imagine two trees during a storm. One has shallow roots. Its branches look impressive. Its leaves are beautiful, but the first strong wind tears it apart. The second tree appears ordinary, nothing spectacular, yet its roots run deep. The storm arrives, and it barely moves. People spend years decorating the branches. Very few strengthen the roots. Your roots are your principles, your discipline, your habits, your purpose. These are the things no one can take from you. The greatest mistake people make is believing confidence comes after achievement. It rarely does. Achievement simply reveals the confidence you practiced before anyone noticed. Confidence isn't built by winning every battle. It's built by keeping promises to yourself. Every morning you wake up and follow through. You deposit another brick into your identity. Every time you quit halfway, you quietly remove one. Eventually, your subconscious develops a conclusion. Either I trust myself, or I don't. That internal relationship determines almost everything else. Because if you don't trust yourself, you'll constantly search for someone else to guide you, someone else to reassure you, someone else to approve your decisions. That dependence becomes exhausting. The strongest people you've ever met probably weren't fearless. They simply learned to trust themselves more than they trusted external noise. This is where purpose becomes essential. A person without purpose becomes available for everyone else's agenda. Think about it. If you don't decide where your energy goes, someone else will. You'll become busy without becoming fulfilled. You'll solve everyone else's problems while ignoring your own. Days become weeks. Weeks become years. Then one morning you wake up wondering where your life disappeared. It disappeared one unnecessary obligation at a time. Purpose protects attention. Attention shapes reality. Where your attention goes, your life follows. This is why highly focused people naturally become scarce. They're not pretending to be unavailable. They genuinely are. Because they're building something larger than temporary approval, a business, a craft, a mission, a healthier body, a stronger mind, a meaningful future. People begin respecting them, not because they ask for respect, but because their life has direction. Direction creates gravity. Gravity attracts. Desperation repels. Notice something fascinating. People chase those who appear fulfilled without them, not because humans enjoy rejection, because independence communicates value. It says, I have something worth protecting, and people instinctively respect what someone refuses to waste. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming intentional. Every invitation receives consideration. Every commitment has a cost. Every yes protects something or sacrifices something. You become selective, not arrogant, selective. The difference is enormous. Arrogance believes it's above others. Selectivity understands time is limited. One protects ego, the other protects purpose. Eventually, you'll notice something remarkable. The people who once demanded unlimited access begin adjusting their behavior. Not because you've manipulated them, because you've changed the rules. Human beings adapt to the standards consistently demonstrated around them. Respect follows consistency, not speeches. Not motivational quotes, not emotional promises, consistency. You stop chasing people, you stop over-explaining, you stop rescuing everyone, and suddenly, your presence becomes more valuable. Not because you've become mysterious, because you've become intentional. There will be critics, there always are. Some will call you selfish, others will say you've changed. Smile. They're right. You have changed. Growth always looks like betrayal to people who benefited from your limitations. Never apologize for becoming healthier. Never apologize for protecting your peace. Never apologize for respecting yourself. The version of you who tolerated constant disrespect needed compassion, but it also needed to end. Because survival and self-betrayal are not the same thing. Imagine yourself 1 year from today. You walk into a room without searching for approval. You speak without rushing. You listen more than you explain. When someone crosses a boundary, you address it calmly. When someone leaves because they can no longer manipulate you, you let them go peacefully. Your happiness no longer rises and falls with every opinion around you. You've become emotionally anchored. That is real confidence, not dominance, not intimidation, not ego, freedom. Because freedom is the ability to remain yourself, regardless of who approves. In the end, people will always test your boundaries. The world will always reward clarity over confusion. And life will always ask one question: who controls your mind? If the answer is other people, you will always feel used. If the answer is you, no one can truly own your peace. The day you stop begging for permission to exist is the day your life finally becomes yours. Thank you for watching. If this video challenged the way you think, subscribe and join this community for more deep insights into psychology, philosophy, and personal power. And tell me in the comments, what is one boundary you will stop compromising starting today? Sometimes, one decision is all it takes to change the direction of your entire life.